Welcome to another Deck Tech by your pal Alkadron. I want to talk about Leafkin Avenger today. It's weird calling him that because for the last most of a year I've referred to this card pretty much exclusively as the Angry Elemental. It wasn't until very recently that I even learned his actual name. He's just the Angry Elemental. Look at his face, he's so mad about it. I love this guy because he does so many things. It's really fun. And he pulls your deck in a couple different directions at the same time. And I feel like all of those different directions are actually secretly the same direction. And they're all very complementary. And they let you do some very cool stuff. So let's talk about where I went with this card. Let's talk about what he does. He's a 4-mana 4/3. He taps to add 1 mana for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. So probably you can already guess, one of the themes of this particular Gruul deck is going to be having lots of creatures that have lots of power. His other ability is the mana sink. So he taps to add green mana, that's the mana generation. The mana sink is, for 8 mana, he deals damage equal to his power to target player. So having lots of creatures with lots of power gets you lots of mana, and you can use that mana to dome people for, as printed, 4 damage. But you can probably guess, we're going to try to make it bigger than 4. If we increase his power, then we can dome people for 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. I've played this deck a handful of times. It is not unreasonable for you to hit 16 mana and be able to use this ability twice while he has 8 power. You can just instant speed send 16 damage to someone's face casually for free. It's kind of wild. So let's see where we're going with this. The first place I went with this is going to be maybe a little surprising. I have a lot of mana dorks. I want to be able to get up to big mana really fast, and I like that a lot of that mana comes from creatures. One of the big reasons I like that all of that mana comes from creatures is these guys. Vitalize and Mobilize. This card by himself is going to be tapping for 3 or 4 or 5 mana easily. 1 Vitalize gets you that 5 mana again. And if you have a handful of other dorks online, it gets you all of their mana again as well. You can consistently tap for 16 mana in this deck. One of these can put you up into the 24-25 range pretty effortlessly. So, we have a lot of dorks. This guy adds mana and deals damage to people. This guy adds mana and draws you a card when he comes in. This guy adds mana equal to his power. I mentioned we had some ways to increase our Angry Boy's power. We can use those on him to increase his power, and then he taps for a lot. That's very good. The other great thing about this guy is if you increase his power to 4 or more with, say, something like an axe, not only does he tap for 4, but your Leafkin, your Angry Elemental is going to see him as a creature with 4 power, and your Elemental is going to tap for 1 more as well, which is pretty great. So these guys tap for a lot. I'll set the axe aside. This guy is pretty much always good for 2 mana. He also filters your, what's he called? I forget that he's in Japanese. This is Soulbright Flamekin. He's a 2 mana 2/1. For 2 colorless, he'll give target creature trample, and then if you've activated that ability 3 times, or if that's the 3rd time that ability is resolving, you get to add 8 red mana to your pool. So as long as you have 6 mana to activate this 3 times, he will give you 8, which is what I mean when I say he's pretty much always good to add 2 mana to your pool. It's also good for giving your huge creatures trample, which is incredible. This is what I mean when I say that these different goals are overlapping. This guy will generate mana, he will give your huge creatures trample, he will filter some of this green mana into red if you need that to activate the ability. He's the whole deal. These are some dorks that usually tap for 1 mana, but sometimes tap for 2 mana. This guy will tap for a bonus mana if you control 4 or more creatures. Also, I think that this guy and this guy are the same person. Yeah, this is the M20 version of the Elemental. This is the M21. He got mad about it. I'm rooted in the life of all that thrives around me. You cannot move me. My roots are ash. My heart is a smoldering ember. What I could not protect, I will avenge. Yeah, these are definitely the same guy. So that's interesting. This guy gives you bonus mana if you control 4 creatures. These guys will each give you a bonus mana if you control a big creature, like this guy. So each of these is like a soul ring with a body. It costs 2, and they pretty much always tap for 2 mana. These cards are great. They're mana generating fiends. Then we get to the really good stuff. Werebear and Ulvenwald Captive are also 2 mana dorks. These guys count as the good stuff because eventually late game, the Werebear is going to be a 4/4, which turns on your Angry Boy. And the Ulvenwald Captive is eventually going to be a 4/6 that taps to add 2 mana to your pool. So the mana just keeps piling up with these guys. A 2 mana 1/1 that taps for 1 isn't terrible. Like, it's not great. It's not, Llanowar Elves, but it's respectable. But then turning him into a 4/4 that also counts for this guy's mana is crazy. And this is like worth 3 mana because he taps for 2 and he lets this guy tap for an additional 1. There's just a lot of mana coming out of these guys. And they come down so early. They're both 2-drops. Those cards are great. These are more mana dorks that all embiggen your commander. Here's a 4-power creature that taps for 2. Here's a 4-power creature that taps for 3. All of them make this guy tap for extra. Here's a 4-power creature that land fetches. This deck is just swimming in mana. I'm not exaggerating about being able to hit 16 consistently. A lot. These dorks are crazy. And it just piles up. So, when you have this many mana dorks that all tap for, most of which tap for 2 mana, and this guy's going to tap for a lot, you can see why untapping your entire board becomes pretty crazy. Even if you can't untap your entire board, you usually have at least one guy who's tapping for 4 or 5. So we want to untap him at least. Seeker of Skybreak will tap to untap this guy, give you another 5 mana pretty effortlessly. Quirin Ranger will also untap this for the cost of putting a land into your hand, which is a small price to pay for an extra 4 or 5 mana. That will help you get to 16, which will help you activate him twice in a turn, which is pretty nuts. These are the other 2 cards we have that untap our Elemental. I like these because they put counters on him. So they untap him once to give you like a mana, a big burst of mana. They're kind of like, it's kind of like a dark ritual sort of thing. Like if this guy taps for 4, then you're spending 1 mana and a card to gain 4 more. So very dark ritual-ish. But I run them, I recognize Dark Ritual is not a great card in PDH. In a deck that wants to accumulate value over time and not just be super bursty. But these are worth it in the deck because they make him permanently bigger. And when they do get us to 16 mana, that'll make it deal, extra damage when we use that mana, which is great. We want that damage. I'm going to pick up this axe again so I can put it with the axe club. These are some other ways we have. We're out of ways to untap the guy. Now we're in the ways that just make him bigger. Bone Splitter. Everyone knows Bone Splitter. It's busted as heck. 1 mana to cast, 1 mana to equip, plus 2 power. That's crazy value on this guy. when he can just deal his power and damage to anyone for free. This is their attempt to make a slightly more balanced Bone Splitter. It costs 1 more to equip, and the benefit you get for that is that it's indestructible, which is pretty good. Amorphous Axe will give 3 power. The equip is a little more expensive, but it's worth it. We want all of that power. So we're going to give the angry boy some axes, and we're going to fling them at some people's heads. It's going to be great. We also, in the Make Our Boy Bigger category, have these 3 cards. Rancor is just better than Bone Splitter, which is crazy to think about. It's 1 damage for 2 power, and it just always comes back when the creature dies. Invigorate I really like because it's free. If you really need... you want to be playing spells that'll buff his power so that you can spend all of your mana on this ability. You don't want to be spending your mana to buff his power. If you spend so much mana buffing his power that you lose out on an activation, then you're not gaining anything. You're just spending cards to do nothing. So Invigorate being free to cast lets you buff his power for free, and then you get an extra activation out of it. This is very strong. I like that. Fist of Flames will buff his power and then draw us cards. Or I guess it does it backwards. It'll draw us cards and then it'll buff his power. It'll also give things trample if we just need to trample through for some big damage. That'll be pretty powerful. I think one of the reasons I really like Invigorate is because we consistently hit 16 mana and can very feasibly see 24 with some of those untap, vitalize, or mobilize effects. If we were only going to do 1 activation with this guy, giving someone 3 life to deal them 4 more damage is a terrible use of a card. If we're getting 2 or maybe even possibly 3 activations out of this guy, then that's giving them 3 life to do 8 or 12 extra damage, and that is an excellent use of a card. That's just 5 free damage. It's a free Lava Axe at its worst. Invigorate's crazy. So, that's all the weird tricks we have. We're going to make our guy big. We're going to untap him. We're going to have a bunch of mana dorks. Some of our mana dorks are huge. Most of the rest of this deck is just other really big creatures, so that you can have a bunch of fatties for this guy to give you lots of mana. It's also just fun to attack with fatties. So these are the 2 that have escape. I like that they're very cheap. They have that 4 power, so the first time you cast them, they're going to turn on your angry elemental. And then when they die, you can just bring them back. This deck doesn't have really anything to do with its graveyard, so like exiling the cards from it isn't a problem for us. We weren't going to get them back anyway. These costs are pretty negligible. These are just really hard to get rid of, and they don't stay gone, which is great for us. This deck does have some problems with drawing cards and like staying sort of relevant. It's not a huge problem because we have a great mana sink. Like, we don't need to be drawing big spells to pump our mana into. Like, we have our mana sink right here. It's always available to us. But we still want to have some late game, not late game presence. Durability? These guys are durability. These 3 cards are all big enough to turn on the elemental, and they draw us cards. All 3 of these guys will give us the Monarch, and that's really good for us. They're all just very respectable bodies as well. 4/4s are good. The 5/2 with trample is nice. This is the Cascade Party. Being able to just play this guy and then cascade into another giant creature is hilarious and awesome. I love all 3 of these cards. They're just incredible value, and they're all big enough that they activate the guy. It's too good. These are some little baby guys, some 4 mana beaters. We want to be able to get these guys down real early. The Maulhorn is a favorite of mine. He just attacks all the time without ever stopping, and I love that. Imperiosaur, we do have a ton of basic lands in this deck, so playing him won't be a problem. The Turret Ogre is a 4/3 for 4 mana. Reach is good. Reach is going to be helpful for us in this deck. We don't have a lot of ways to deal with flyers. So that Reach is pretty relevant, and he deals 2 damage to each opponent when he comes in, as long as we have another big creature, and we probably have another big creature. So the Turret Ogre, pretty versatile. Here's some more not very big creatures, right? Or not too enormous. They're on the smaller side of our big side. They're the 5 mana guys. We got a 4/4 and a 5/3 that's going to give our boys trample and make things really hard to block. Again, they're giving us mana. They're filling up our board with big, good, valuable threats. These are great cards. This is the last of the sort of cheapish ones. Like after this, they get more expensive. We're going up into the 8s. So that this guy only costs 5 is nice. For 5 mana, he's a 4/4 with bad fire breathing and trample. So he's kind of a threat on his own. For 7 mana, which is super easy to get in this deck, we will get 7 pretty effortlessly. He turns into a 5/7 trampler with incredible fire breathing. This kind of 1 generic mana for fire breathing on a trampler in a deck that can effortlessly generate 16 mana is really good. If this guy resolves and then flips and you get an attack with him, someone's going to die. Gross and Tusker is kind of mediocre as a card, honestly, in this deck. I like that when you cycle this card, you get to do a land fetch, which is nice. A lot of times we're not going to need the land fetch, and he's just going to be a body. And for 7 mana, his body isn't great, but the versatility makes it pretty worthwhile. And drawing cards is good. Gross and Tusker's friend in the 7 mana category is the Wrecking Beast. We got either a 6/6 trample haste or a 7/7 trampler. Usually he's just going to be a 6/6 trample haste, but sometimes you really need that 7/7. In the 8-drop slot, we have a 9/9 and an 8/9 with trample, which is beef. It's beef for days. These guys are sort of in the miscellaneous category for our big creature festival. Coal Hauler Swine just kind of should be in all the red decks. He just damages everyone, and I love that. And he turns on the elemental, which is crazy. Silverback Shaman is a really aggressively costed 5/4 with trample and gives you a card when he dies, which is great. M20 had some spicy goodies for us. We have more fatties. These are the fatties that kill things when they happen. So we'll do Wild Celebrants and Batterhorn first. These are both 5 mana creatures. They're both big enough that the Leafkin sees them for mana, and they both destroy artifacts when they come into play, which is great. We love it when we get a body and removal and mana out of one card. That's good for us. These are even better. They're a little bit more versatile. This is a 4/4 that will destroy an artifact or enchantment when it comes in. This is a 4/4 that starts with a counter, and you can pull that counter off to destroy a artifact or enchantment later, which is pretty powerful. Like, sometimes you end up in situations where you have this in your hand and you want to play it so you can have a body and get that mana, but there's no really good targets for the destroy effect. That's when the Wickerbaugh Elder really shines. You can play him early. He won't give you the mana until you take the counter off, but having that available as a potential threat is really good. In the continuing theme of killing artifacts and enchantments, Hull Breach is really efficient, and we like it. It destroys an artifact and an enchantment for just 2 mana. That's some high quality value there. These are cards in the removal suite that I like because they go really, really well with all of the giant, enormous, ridiculously large creatures, like Ancient Brontodon or Eldrazi Devastator. Any deck that runs Ancient Brontodon and Eldrazi Devastator wants the ability to just send damage equal to these creatures' power anywhere they want. And in the case of the Devastator, or if you have another way to give the Brontodon trample, just being able to send the excess damage straight to someone's face is pretty impressive. So these are really great creature removal spells. In a pinch, the Soul's Fire can send damage to someone's face. So 9 damage to someone's face, not something to take lightly. We have Karavek's Torch and Fireball and Rolling Thunder. These cards are all very versatile removal spells. I like them because they can, for a certain amount of mana, they can kill problem creatures very effectively. Rolling Thunder is capable of killing lots of creatures at once, which is great. Fireball is as well, but it's a lot more expensive to do that. It's pretty inefficient at killing lots of things at once. Karavek's Torch is just very hard to interact with. Anything that targets it costs 2. These cards are also really, really good finishers. If people keep killing the Avenger and he doesn't get to accumulate any power, like he keeps dying and he doesn't get to keep any of those counters, or people are destroying our axes and they're not letting him have power, then if he only has 4 power and you get your 16 mana, you can activate him twice and that's only 8 damage. Which is, 8 damage without spending a card from your hand is not bad, but we can do better. These are great for that. If you get the 16, 17, 18, 20 mana and a Fireball, it's pretty game ending. So these are nice, versatile control and finisher pieces. This is the miscellaneous category. We want to protect our Leafkin Avenger, so we can regenerate him a whole bunch with Broken Fall. We can give him hexproof and get that extra counter on him with Snakeskin Veil to prevent him from getting killed. Both of these cards are incredible. We have a draw stuff category as well. Snake Umbra is another way to protect our commander, and whenever it deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. That's not combat damage. So if we have this on our commander, every time we activate this ability and deal 5 or 6 or 8 damage to someone's face, we're also drawing cards off it, which is kind of gross. These are much more mundane card draw effects. Sentinel Woodreaders is just a really, really bad divination. It's like if Muldrifter cost 6 mana and didn't have Evoke and wasn't a flyer. It would be Sentinel Woodreaders, which is not very impressive, but our deck has almost 0 other draw power, so we take what we can get in red and green. Trackdown is a nice little Scry 3 that'll help fix some draws, and then it will put the top card of our library into our hand if it's a creature or a land. That's most of this deck, so not something to worry about missing. Yavimaya Elder is a great way to draw cards. He will put 3 cards into your hand. One of them will be a card off the top, and then the other 2 will be lands that you pull out of your deck when you sacrifice them. That's a pretty good deal. You pull the lands out first, so you get a little bit of deck thinning before you draw this card, which is nice. These are the other 2 ways we have of drawing cards. A deck with this many dorks probably doesn't need a ton of rocks, but I like these 2 rocks because the card draw potential that they offer. Because this taps itself to use its second ability, it's sort of effectively like 5 mana. If you're using that ability, you're 5 mana down for your turn. Drawing 2 cards is worth 5 mana in this deck. We're going to have the spare mana. We don't have the spare cards. And that it ramps us early game is nice. The Bonder's Ornament is just continual card draw. We can spend 4 to tap it to draw a card anytime we need to. That's pretty great, again, in a deck that has this much mana and this little card draw. Grow from the Ashes and Everflowing Chalice will round out our non-creature ramp package. Non-creature ramp is just these 4 guys. Two of them draw us cards. Everflowing Chalice is just too good to pass up. Like usually I put Everflowing Chalice in the same decks into which I put stuff like Sisay's Ring and Urgolem's Eye, because I really need this 4-drop taps for 2 card. In this deck, this can very easily be a 10-drop that taps for 5. Like that's a thing that just happens. No problem. And you can spend 5 mana on this to just pull 2 lands out of your deck and put them into play untapped. The value on these 2 cards is, like, you looking at this enormous pile of dorks, it's pretty easy to think he doesn't need any more ramp, but this ramp is just too strong to not run in a deck that wants to be hitting 16 mana. Everything else here is lands. We're out of spells already. We got, these are kind of the generic ones. Command Tower, both fetches. These are incredible because they will make our commander bigger. Forge of Heroes is the worst of them. Opal Palace, it taps for a colorless, or we can tap one and filter a colored into it. And if that colored mana gets spent on your commander, it comes in with a +1/+1 counter for each time it has been cast so far this game. This is an absolute powerhouse of making sure that the Avenger gets huge. Because the Avenger is going to die a few times. People are going to very correctly perceive him as a threat. They're going to try and kill him. So you're going to recast him for 6 and then 8 and then 10. And having him come in, when you cast him for 10, having him come in as an 8/7 creature is just crazy. You put the Rancor on him and now his ability is doming people for 10. It's gross. Forge of Heroes only ever puts 1 counter on him, but that 1 counter is still better than nothing. Honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, this deck probably should be running expedition maps so that I can make sure that I always have access to this palace, because it's a really important way to make that Avenger bigger. After that, we got your standard issue dual lands. Gruul Turf is the bouncy one. Rugged Highlands is the gain life one. No surprises there. These 2 cards I like in the deck because they're sort of free ways to make his power bigger for a turn. They cost you your land drop, which is fine. The deck has plenty of ways to make up for that lost mana for the turn. But being able to make him huge with the Teetering Peaks on a turn that you're going to be activating him once or twice is really good. Turn Timber is only +1/+1, but we take that too. It's free real estate. Everything else is basics. We're running, I think, 26 basics, probably 13 of each. I didn't really count before I started making this video. That's the deck. Get 16 mana. Crush people's skulls. It's really fun. My favorite part about this deck is that it's really fun just talking about using him. I didn't even really talk about the attack step. You get to attack with beef. Such impressive beef. This deck is a good time. I love it.